Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name's Jeff Thomas, and I've got a very special guest with us today, Kyle Circle, who is from a family who's had real estate, largely farming assets and other real estate, in the family for, get this, 19 generations. I can't even do the math, Kyle, on how long that is. Kyle likes to say that the family's often used high-tech thinking and low-tech businesses. He's an entrepreneur himself from an entrepreneurial family, but he also has a passion for helping other family business folks think about communication. This, I think, is part of his superpower. Kyle, I just want to welcome you to the program.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
This is going to be super fun. All right, Kyle. Well, we always start with, where did you grow up? What was the family like? What was going on? Did they enlist you in all kinds of entrepreneurial things, suck you in, do your own thing? Was there faith? What was happening in the Circle household growing up?
Well, so to give you a little background, when you say 19 generations, so this is started in Germany, came to the States. No one really had anything of significance, but there was obviously a compounding effect of wisdom and values that were being transferred. And it was really with my dad's generation that he started with a half an acre and a strawberry stand in Orange, California, Southern California. And so I grew up, my mom ran strawberry stands, and I grew up being carted around to check in with each of the strawberry stands. That's 11 awesome. Years old, my dad says, hey, when you turn 16, you got to buy your own car. I'm 11 years old. I'm not thinking about buying a car, but he wanted to set into motion. Don't expect that you need to be in this business or you need to work in this business, but you're welcome to if you want to start earning some income. Yeah. And so that put me on a trajectory of starting a business at age 11 that very much followed the footsteps because it was the easiest access of knowledge. Was buying some produce from my dad and having a little street corner card table strawberry, or we had corn and cantaloupe is what we had.
Oh, corn.
And so it was an amazing environment where we're first generation, everything's trapped in the ground, right? You've got big bank loans, you've got all the high stress of a business, but generosity and faith was at a foundational level. Grew up in a Presbyterian church. My dad was the chairman of the board, and I was an acolyte and went to the Christian school there. And it was just an incredible experience to just grow up around values that I didn't probably realize at much of the time how it had transformed my life later and really pave a foundation for later in life.
And you've got two younger siblings, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of three. We're about 2.5 years apart. Brothers in finance, sister was in pharmaceutical sales. And both married, 2 kids each. We have 2 kids now. So
you're working the stand. Do they also own a family farm? Are you working on the farm too? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so started with that half an acre strawberry stand when my dad was in high school. Grew that to mostly growing, not only largest strawberry producer in the U.S., but growing all over the state of California, Salinas, Watsonville, Central Coast, which is Oxnard, Ventura, Santa Maria, Orange County, Irvine, Laguna Hills, San Clemente, Seal Beach, naval weapons bases. So a lot of leased land, a lot of owned land.
Okay.
Yeah. I started working in the business, going with my dad to the actual office when I was 13 to actually get picked up by a foreman and actually work on the farm. And he would pick me up. This is 6 days a week, all summer long, 12 hours a day or more. And I was driving a tractor, picking up rocks, digging ditches. It was just hard labor.
Now, this next story is going to be where you are a candidate for most interesting man in the world, because apparently you also have some musical skills. So let's talk about how those came into play and what you did with them.
Yeah, it was through church. I like to say as part of a joke, but real was all my buddies played in the worship band and they all got the girls. So I figured I might as well learn an instrument. And but I was always the business guy around. I was always like, how can we
Right,
turn this into a
right. The
business? And
practical, yeah, street
yeah, yeah.
smart.
So I joined the worship band at church in junior high, and then start a local band, a little local record label, booking agency, and we started signing bands and doing that. And before I knew it, I ended up meeting Katy Perry, who was not Katy Perry at the time. She became Katy Perry, and
Okay.
having that opportunity, I was in management. I was on the artist side, but I'd always been on the artist side with the goal of being on really the leadership and the management side. And that
Okay.
took me into concert promotion and A&R, and had the opportunity to find an artist named Francesca Battistelli in a coffee shop in Florida and helped her get her record deal. And then my last artist is a number one country artist now today. He lived with us for a year, named Nate Smith. So it's an incredible journey of trying to figure out how to make a living in an industry that is feast or famine.
Right. I mean, anecdotally, wasn't there some keyboard playing happening for Katy Perry at some point before she was Katy Perry?
For her,
Yes.
so she was a think Taylor Swift Christian artist
Yeah.
with a acoustic guitar. Her dad was a pastor, Santa Barbara, California, and a guy named Glenn Ballard who found and created Alanis Morissette found her and brought
Okay.
her out of Christian music into the mainstream side, which is when I got involved.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Anyway, I just love that part of the story. So I think this is I love that vignette uh because I think it explains the way you kind of look at the world. Like anything that
Yeah,
hits you, I think you have this sort of entrepreneurial
I
thing
do.
that goes.
I
So,
do. Hey, Jeff, can we pause for 1 minute?
yes.
Of the whole time I'm getting a delivery that needed a
No,
signature,
no,
and
no
so
problem. Go grab it.
they came right now.
Okay, you got it?
Well, my wife's getting it.
She's getting it? Let me
Yeah.
know. Let me know when we're good. I can't hear anything, by the way. Are
I
you
bet
worried
you
about
can't, but there was,
it's distracting to you?
what is that? A big old,
Oh, it's Christmas. You're not allowed to look.
I know I'm not.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not. What does it say? I know. We'll cut it. An artist. Okay, great. It's a big old tube. We're like,
Okay.
oh, I know who it is, I think.
Fishing rod.
No, I met this guy. He's like Michelangelo of our generation. He's doing all these sculptor crests and brought him to something called Wedgwood Circle this year. And I think
Okay.
he sent me something maybe as a thank you
Gotcha,
because
gotcha.
it's amazing. Okay, so
All
back
right,
to what
so
you were saying. You were
all
giving the
right,
summary.
can we restart?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have this foray into the music business. You got the strawberry stand. Take us through now. Do you go off to college, or do we not need that? What's happening after this?
So I tried to prepare myself for college, did the SATs, failed all that, wanted to go to Chapman University, did a few classes while I was, making my way up in music. But the reality was I was living in my mind the dream of what I was setting out to do. And so why go do
Why rock the
anything
boat?
that?
You already
Yeah.
got it going.
Yeah. But I was the first, I would have been that first generation going into that. And so it was a huge
Right.
motive for the family. There was definitely some disappointment, like, hey, we've prepared for this. Let's go. And I'm just so entrepreneurial. I'm like, no, I want to get in business and make money.
Yeah. So how long does this music business last? Or
I
was
was
it
in
the strawberries that
15,
took
yeah, I
over?
was in 15 years professionally. Took me about till 2010. And I had actually moved, taking that high tech thinking and low tech industry that I kind of
Yeah.
referenced in the family, a lot of innovation around produce and delivery of how you received it, and how we consume it today with prepared foods, upcycling, food waste. Well, I didn't invent the credit card machine, but I did bring credit card processing to touring bands. And at the time, it was venue sale or ATM machines. And I had this incredible opportunity to partner with Chase and City National and some of the big banks. And all they cared about was deposits. And I stepped in and became this bridge for merchandise being sold at concerts with wireless credit card machines. And that was what really moved me into a place where I could actually make a living doing what I was doing.
Yeah, because for those not old enough to remember, I do remember being at concerts, and if you wanted to buy a CD or a T-shirt, if you didn't have cash, you're out of luck. I mean,
And you don't
right?
get the impulse, yeah, and you don't get the impulse purchase, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you sort of solved that problem. And did you
Yeah.
ultimately sell that business or just run it for a while? What was
No, I
the
did. So I was able to go through an exit on that business, and then following that, had a tech startup in the mobile payment space. This was pre-Square, pre-Apple Pay. We had a few patents. That was one of my, biggest lessons in life, coming off of some success and momentum, and then being really early to something.
oh,
So we
too,
ended
maybe
up,
too early?
yeah, it felt too early in the sense of like, I don't know that we knew the marketplace was going to be as competitive and financially backed, and we're a startup in that space. So we ended up selling our intellectual property. And then my wife and I had this incredible opportunity to have a startup together and work together for a decade.
And what was that?
So that was around, so she had been a early top 50 mom blogger. And that was mostly crafters and creators and entrepreneurs that were building community for moms. And I saw it just like managing bands. You're managing creatives, and creatives tend
100%.
they tend to not be really great with business. And so they need to be wrapped around when it came to contract negotiation, legal,
You were
and
telling
business
me this is
opportunity.
influencers before that was nobody talked about influencers 20 years ago. They talked
That's
about
correct.
bloggers.
Bloggers, mom bloggers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
so
were
we
trying to
built.
monetize essentially, I mean, you sort of help create this idea of an influencer. I mean, with an
Yeah.
economic engine.
Yeah, we were trying to solve her problem, which was brands coming to her, wanting
Right.
to pay her. How do we build a framework around it? Then her friends come and say, hey, would you help us do the same? So we decide, let's build around that, and created an agency that did master service agreements with brands that were sold at
Brilliant.
Target and Walmart. Again, we didn't invent the blog, but we applied high tech thinking into a low tech industry that didn't identify. It was all SEO, and this was word of mouth marketing through the influence of the audiences of these moms.
I mean,
And that turned into influencer marketing.
how many of these bloggers did you help? I mean,
So we had a kind of niche part of the ecosystem. We ended up curating about 5,500 women. We had a
wow.
male category of stay-at-home dads, multicultural, military, and our whole team came from the blogger space. And so we spoke that
Yeah,
language, which
sure.
oftentimes the brands and the PR firms didn't. That wasn't their expertise. And so, yeah, it gave us an incredible momentum in a market that felt like lightning in a bottle. We had a lot of success very quickly, and we're able to really care for a lot of families that were otherwise not being able to monetize their audience.
That's so cool. Now, did you sell that one?
We did not sell that one.
Okay.
We did not sell that one, but we had an incredible amount of liquidity coming out of that business that, really bolstered us into diversity of business, which got us into real estate.
Now, maybe before we get into the real estate, you tell me what the best way to tell this story is. But while you're doing all these entrepreneurial things, and you talked about dads like, hey man, if you want a car at 11, go make your own. So we kind of have a clue about dad's attitude. But your folks were entrepreneurs as well. But there's a parallel track of your dad being an entrepreneur, your parents, and then doing some foundation work and all of that kind of stuff. And I know you had some involvement. So could you kind of bring into focus your folks and their entrepreneurial journey and how it maybe intersected with yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So first generation, not first generation farmer, but first generation that went, significant.
Right.
And that was due to incredible opportunities of having a
Built a
business
lot of value.
partner.
Built a
Yeah,
lot of
built a lot
value.
of value, had a business partner early on.
Okay.
Dad of the business partner was a financier, bought him out later and was able to get to an exit at a pretty young age of 43. And so kind of living in the shadows of that was both exciting and achieving to want to sort of achieve that kind of growth and opportunity, maybe even outdo when I was much younger, was the general thought. But for my dad, he was so young, he parked that in a family foundation, went right back to work building another business. Fast forward, has had a number of exits, all in and around farming. And he's got the Midas touch. He has such a gift around leadership and teams. And, a big part of their life has been driven by their generosity. And so being able to grow up around that and watch that, it was not only said, but it was modeled. And I had this incredible opportunity at a young age, getting married. I met my wife at 19, got married at 21. And it was the same year or just a year prior that he was selling the business and he was starting the family foundation. And so, they didn't know what they were doing, first gen. So they started this family foundation, and my wife and I took a deep interest in what was going on with the gifting and the grants and the relationship building. And so we just started showing up in environments that were, galas and president's weekends and things of that nature, and looking around the room and going, hey, where's the rest of the rising next gen?
Right. You're the only young people in the room.
There was none. There was a handful of
Right.
significant name brand families, but outside of that, there was nobody. And
Right.
development people and executive directors and church, like no one was even identifying that this is an audience that maybe they're a vote at the table on the board. And so if you can't get a hold of matriarch and patriarch, your next best move is the inheriting next gen who's being potentially groomed or just has a passion for it. They're in the audience and no one cares much about it.
Did you ever have a full-time job that was running the foundation? You or your wife?
Never was a full-time job.
Okay,
25%.
I think this is a critical thing, because I think one of the unique things about your situation is that, okay, like mom and dad are doing their whole entrepreneurial sort of sequence of 4 businesses, selling them, dumping a bunch of money in the foundation. That's cool that they include you. Were your siblings included at all, or were you the only one that showed interest in this?
I was at a different age and stage of life because I didn't go to college and I got married young and then started having kids and had a business. My siblings were still in high school.
Right.
So it was a very different, they both went to college. My sister got married a little later. My brother got, married in his mid-20s.
Yeah.
So it was just different for them. I had more available time as an entrepreneur.
Well, you were also an entrepreneur who, wasn't punching a clock to
That's
where
correct.
you could go to these things. You know what I mean?
That's
You had more of
correct.
a flexible schedule. So, and I know you have a heart, and we're going to get into this, for talking to maybe, how would you describe it? Brokering conversations between generations to talk about these things. Where, so you just gave this vignette about showing up, where people are giving
Yeah.
away money and you're the only young person. What are some of the other things? Like, I know you have a heart for pastors. What are some of the other things that kind of built that desire for you to help other people communicate?
Yeah, so I think there was an intersection of kind of 3 different things that were happening.
Okay.
One was me working on the family foundation and leading different conversations, asking curious questions, being in an environment as a bit of a pioneer and leader of that rising next gen.
Yeah.
Number 2 was I had this incredible opportunity to join a board with my wife with an organization called Standing Stone Ministry. I think of them as Switzerland for soul care of pastors and ministry leaders. I ended up getting to chair the national board and got a look under the hood of the health or the lack of health for leaders, and how are they being able to finish well and being able to journey with others. And then the third was I read a book called Gospel Patrons by John Reinhardt. It was given to me by a non-blood member on our family foundation who had actually worked at Generous Giving. And she gave me this book. I don't know that she knew how radical of an effect it was going to have on my life.
Wow.
And I really felt the Holy Spirit speak to me reading this book, that I was going to raise up the next generation of gospel patrons in this generation to fulfill the Great Commission and beyond. And I put the book down with definitely some pride. And I was like, well, Lord, like, I'm a gospel patron. And I was pretty proud of that. And the Lord convicted me. He didn't need any of my money. He actually needed my influence. And so that sent me on a journey, unbeknownst to the rest of the family, that I wanted to go do a research project. And so between San Diego and LA, I met with 132 families. And in doing that, the conversation kept coming up. How do I get a child like yours to participate in, what we would want to build in the future or we already have? And unbeknownst to me, just organically, the conversations from a matriarch and patriarch started engaging me in there wasn't even a business model for it, right? It was simply just, can you help us as a guide? Right. And so this intersection just turned into something natural around 2019, 20, and has only grown to today, just being able to be really an interpreter. And I'm sitting in Gen 2 and Gen 1 seat. That makes a bit of a unique experience because I'm living both seats.
Now, is this a volunteer activity? Is this something you're trying to make a living doing? You have this business brain, so I know you've thought about this.
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah,
think
so
about
the first step would have been on the Family Foundation side, 14 years volunteer.
Yeah.
I'd say the last 5 years was 25% of my available time.
Okay.
Probably one of the reasons I ended up exiting that was because I was dedicating such a significant amount of time to that. And I do have bills to pay. And I had my own success, but I'm in earning years and I still want to be able to produce.
Right.
The other was, it was very clear to me that the need was so great, and this deep feeling, and even gets me emotional thinking about it today, that there was probably nobody coming to help. I mean, there was nobody really helping on the softer side. I had been part of a
The
program.
calling to help families communicate
Yeah,
was
yeah.
huge. And so anyway, that makes sense. Talk about how I thought this was an aha moment before we started recording for me. I hope it is for others. Why did you talk about Standing Stone Ministry, helping pastors? What about that? Connect the dots between that engagement with that nonprofit and dealing with family business owners.
Yeah, so I got Jim and Debbie Hogan started Standing Stone. You had guys like Bob Shank with the Masters program who were on the board. And being able to show up there, I'm thinking, look, you're just inviting me as a board member of a family foundation.
Sure.
They were actually being very strategic about rising to next gens and integrating them into their board. So that's something for the listeners. You
Okay.
know, are we doing enough of that in our nonprofits, our churches, et cetera? The other interesting step was, because I was looking under the hood of what was going on with these pastors and these ministry leaders and the struggle they were having, that to me, I had this aha moment that the rich young ruler, if you will, or the successful business leader and a ministry leader were identical. Everything was identical about their influence, their marriages, their kids, giving leftovers, having the least amount of strategy on the home front and the best strategy in the ministry or the best strategy in the business with all the succession planning, but none of that really playing into. And it really opened my eyes that, again, who was coming to serve these people? 9 out of 10 of them, if they shared a struggle, a pastor, a ministry leader, if they shared a struggle to HR or their board, 9 out of 10 times they'd lose a job. And so the similarity was, okay, what happens with the rising next gen kid? If they're having a curiosity or they're having a struggle, what happens? If they come to the trusted individuals of the family, if that's mom and dad or other service providers, oftentimes that could easily be weaponized against them, and it wasn't a safe place for them. And so it's really interesting. It really opened my eyes.
I love that parallel. I just never thought about it. Like we were talking about, the only difference is the zeros on the balance sheet. Oftentimes,
Correct.
a lot of pastors don't have a big balance sheet, but the isolation at the top, the loneliness at the top, and it's an intense job. Lots of strategy at work, in the sheep, or
Yes.
in the business world, the customer or the employees, and then the leftovers at home. And I'm guilty of this. Sometimes I just want to go pass out on the couch when I get home, you know?
Yeah.
And
Or
so,
business, or the business loves you. You feel the pulpit loves you.
right,
You love the energy of it all. You got to come
right.
home and deal with, the crying baby or the drama
Right,
with the
right.
teenager. Like these are things that are real though, and we would
Yeah.
have to deal with them in our business. You can't neglect them. You can't
How
neglect
did
them.
how did you learn the right way to do it though? Like, now I don't know, no family's perfect, but have you been able to have this kind of healthy communication with your parents?
I got to go through this incredible opportunity of a bank program that was put on 20 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And it taught me about a lot of softer skills, communication, curiosity, banking, it was almost like a mini MBA for the family. And this was a non-evangelical Christian related program, mainstream bank. You've got all these rising gen kids in it. And I think that not only do the families that I was meeting with, particularly, was there a lot of pain and pus and clarity that there needed to be just curiosity, understanding versus agreement, and so many different things like being right over a relationship. I mean, there's truth in that. Like, do I want to be right every time, or do I want to have a relationship with? Do I want to learn from how that individual who's my child, what are their gifts? What are their callings? What are their interests? Or am I trying to force them into a responsibility that oftentimes, surprisingly, isn't even spoken, right? So people don't even talk about this. It's just you grow up, if you're in the dairy business, particularly farming, I mean, you
Yeah.
just take over the family business.
Yeah,
And
the
if you walk
expectations
away
are
from
there. Nobody even has to say
it,
it.
but that actually makes a big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
So, I think my parents were super clear about what their intentions were. They were putting intentionality around the communication pretty heavily, more around money
Yeah.
than anything else. And I think some of the other things were just unique individual callings and experiences on my life that was intersections that little did I know, fast forward 20 years later from that little banking, I was a guinea pig in
Yeah.
this program. It's played a significant role back in my life, and all of that lived experience has played a role that I have a lot of wisdom that I've walked through and a lot of challenges that I've walked through along the way, a lot of failures and some successes. And so I have a little bit to share. I have a little bit
Right.
to be able to be a guide and a Sherpa in some ways.
But you still have, I mean, you're probably more like your dad than you might even have thought of early. Have you thought about these similarities where you always kind of have some
For sure.
entrepreneurial thing running in the background? Have you noticed
For
this?
sure. I yeah,
Okay,
I think there is a different, I mean, my motivation is to see a million families give away $1 trillion.
that's cool.
Okay. I know it's a big dream. For those that break into down, it's $1 million for a
A million
million
families.
families.
And
Or
we were having some fun with it. I told you
we
before we
were
started recording, I was just like, wow, I've never heard it said like that before. And when I was doing the math, I was like, well, there's probably, there's $500 trillion. Like it's actually conceivable.
yeah,
And I mean, even if it's $1 million families with 10 million bucks, it's a tithe, if you will. So I think that's reasonable. So you're more on the soft side, like you're more passionate about like family communication that leads to a healthy place of releasing. How would you talk about it?
yeah. I would say I had a friend say the other day, and he probably heard somewhere else as well. I think we look at time, treasure, and talent, and we forget the side of the fourth T, which is testimony.
Right.
And if we don't share that testimony, I think the family story and how you got to where you got, including the struggles and including the successes, and also written in a way that's not prescriptive. If you don't capture this generations down the road, it doesn't matter how much we teach on generosity, philanthropy, business skills. People don't know where they came from. So I really feel like family story is the antidote to generational success. And I recognized it wasn't actually about the million to trillion. It was about if families are healthy, they're wildly generous. If they are not, you can be one generation wildly generous, and it may take 3 or 4 generations, if ever, for that same family line to build back up with the producing skills through maybe building another business to actually have similar or greater impact than we're having today. Now, we all believe the Lord's going to come back, but the question is, do we give it all away? The Lord's coming back and we don't care about transferring the other softer side and the other relational skills, because if we nail those, financial flourishes. If we don't, financial is lost.
Okay, so let's get practical. What are 2 or 3 things somebody listening to that? We always stop with a practical tip, and maybe we start shifting to 2 or 3, and then we narrow it down to one tiny little step they could take tomorrow. But what are 2 or 3 things? People are stuck. They don't know how to communicate. What are some tips on how to start breaking the logjam, you know?
So I think the first actually is when we began, I went to an incredible opportunity, Heritage Foundation, Dwayne Donner, and he had created an experience around really looking at your legacy. We wrote our eulogy on night one, and it was a really powerful experience because you really reflect on, man, I'm not invincible. If I die tomorrow, and it's not a matter of if, but when, what would I want people to say about me? And am I even close to what I would be thinking about on that front? The other is would be around capturing this wisdom, vision, and values that the Lord has bestowed on you, your family, maybe generations of the family, and being able to document that in a way that is transferable. And imagine, like, this message may be, all of us think we want to create a leadership book. We want to create something to be a New York Times bestseller. We want to create it for what our next, our fourth quarter goals are, and we're going to go speak. But what if you wrote something that was actually meant for 10 to 50 people?
Right.
There was a vulnerability around that. And the journey of writing it uncovered and unleashed what you're really supposed to do on the other side of your life. I'd say the third thing that comes to mind is to actually start thinking beyond what the business is. And you can be business's mission. You can have all these great production of income to be given away. But what if God's calling you into a different seat? That means pastors. That means business leaders. There's tread on the tires. There's wisdom. How do we invest in the rising next generation and be able to walk through succession and the transfer of influence sooner, rather than most of us are going to go to our grave with our influence and with all this wisdom, even if you have a fracture in your family, right? There's a huge loneliness epidemic. There's a huge epidemic of fractures in families, particularly evangelical Christian families. Sadly, there's estrangement. I'm telling you, these tools break the cycle of that in ways that you would otherwise not realize. And it has nothing to do with your money.
So what is something that they can start with tomorrow to just take a baby step in the right direction?
I think writing a letter to their kids, whether it's ever sent or not. It is something that I've seen utilized. There's incredible people doing incredible work in a variety of spaces of helping people walk through this. And again, we don't tap into the emotions and feelings enough when we're building the business side of what we do, because we're taught that we have to suppress that. And so I'm talking about doing something that taps into this softer emotional feeling side that at first feels very uncomfortable. But I believe the Holy Spirit will speak through it in ways that are unimaginable and are uniquely gifted to unleash something that is God-breathed. Because we may think what we do for a business is our calling, and get trapped in the fact that it loves us back. It doesn't give us as much drama. There's not the pain and pus of kids and generations and married ends and grandkids and even technology. Everything's changed, right? Jeff, we would do careers maybe, 30, 50 years. Well, guess what? Our kids and grandkids are doing businesses for 5 to 7 years, and then you have to pivot. And
Yeah.
what's AI going to do?
Right.
It's
Right.
going to totally transform everything. So I think that that's a first. I think that's a first significant step. Or also learning different language to understand what each of the gifts, calling a purpose and identity assessment, which I could share more in the notes. That I think is a practical first step just to learn about your family and think about teams in your work. Well, do you do this kind of leadership development and thoughts in your own family?
Yeah. Send that to us. We'll share that in the notes. And I'm thinking of Blake Brewer we had on recently on the
Absolutely.
podcast with the Legacy Letter Challenge, where you can go to his website if you have trouble. How do I write a letter to the kids about? We call it a letter of blessing at Arcos. Like just
Correct.
point out things that you love about them, and tell a little bit of your story. And
But
um,
that unlocks something that's
exactly, that's a
vulnerable.
kickstart.
It's a kickstart. So you have to realize what happens with the vulnerability of that. I think in the generosity movement, we sometimes move from this heart posture where we're surrendered and released, and then we get stuck back in our head. How do we stay in this really uncomfortable, spirit-led environment and not get stuck back in our head?
Yeah,
That is the focus when it comes to the family side.
yeah. The giving alone isn't going to do it. You've got to communicate, and they've and of course you've seen all these studies, and it's something like 93% of the reason that the money disappears in 3 generations has nothing to do with the planning, the technical planning. It has everything to do with the lack of communication. So all
Correct.
we're trying to do is bring that communication back and frankly lower the bar a little bit. Like you don't have to start out with an immediate giant family meeting. Like just write them a letter. Write each kid a
Yeah.
letter about what you love about them. Let's start
Yeah.
with that. I love that.
Correct.
And then go from there.
Correct.
Well, I can't thank you enough for spending time with us and sharing your story and your heart for helping others, Kyle. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks everybody to listening and watching this week's Generous Business Owner podcast. Subscribe on YouTube, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.